Hello. Okay, let me say again. Hello, I am Deb Coviello, the Drop In CEO. And as always, I'm grateful that you've dropped in on the show for another amazing conversation where week after week, I get to speak to these leaders who share their insights with you and hopefully inspire you. And I do this work, we share the podcast with you because I sincerely care about the C suite leader of today and tomorrow to navigate their challenges with confidence. And this week, I am so honored to have with me Ed Brenegar, founder and CEO of the Circle of Impact. He is a leadership, thought leader, writer, podcaster, and social catalyst. He writes The Future of Leadership on Substack and hosts the Eddy Network Podcast on YouTube. And he is the author of 8 books. And also, I cannot wait to dig into his backstory. But before we go do that, I just want to say, Ed, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Deb. It's great to be with you. I loved having you on my podcast, and it was such a great experience learning about as a person who drops in as the CEO. What a lovely and fantastic idea.
Now, I appreciate that, Ed. And just for my listeners, Ed was very gracious with his time. He made the show all about me, my experience, my thought leadership, and we just engaged in such healthy conversation about leadership. And I think we're both on the same page. All we want to do is help leaders succeed and also struggle less so they can spend more time doing the things that they truly love to do and also just connecting with humanity. And that's why we're here. But Ed, I'm going to open this up a little bit differently today because, again, you're a leader, you're a thought leader. But I often wonder about your origin story, about how did you get into this line of work? Because I think it's a little bit different for you.
Yeah, it's very different, and it wasn't planned. It wasn't. I didn't realize it. It was. It was one of those things where you just realize that every situation you walked into, you didn't fit. So I'm gonna go back to college. I'm gonna go back to college, and I don't know why. I went to UNC Chapel Hill. Go Tar Heels, and I don't know how I got in. I was an average student in high school, but I was very involved in sports and in social organizations, and I was a leader at the school, and somehow I got in, and I don't know how, but I did. And I remember sitting in the first semester freshman year, sitting in a history class, and I'm thinking, how in the world am I going to read all this stuff? Because I was a slow reader, and and by slow reading, I mean that I thought about everything I read. So I'd read a paragraph and I think about it, read another paragraph, think about it. And if you're reading a 500-page book, that's really difficult. So I was trapped in a situation where I had to perform as a student, but I also wasn't prepared to be that student, the student that the university expected me to be. So after 2 years, I was close to flunking out because I just did not know how to perform. And so I reoriented my whole life and found some discipline. And I spent, about 8 hours in the library every day, outside of class, trying to figure it out. So I ended up graduating, ended up going to seminary a few years later, did well in seminary, and ended up going into the ministry. And I was a Presbyterian minister. My first position was in a large Presbyterian church in Atlanta, and I was doing community ministry. So I was an urban minister. I wasn't the typical parish minister. I was working with poor families and street people and alcoholics and the business community and everybody else outside the door of the church, including a group of people connected to the church who were taking an old porn theater that was next to the church and turning it into a family cinema. And I was the liaison between the church and that group. I mean, there were all these different things I was doing. And at one point I was asked to join a business association as their clergy representative. And this was a large group. It was really more of a community organization. Lots of business people, lots of small business people, lots of arts groups, nonprofit groups, retirees, residents, and then there were some global corporation people in this group, 45 members of the board. and they worked as one. I'd never seen that before. And what I discovered was, oh, this is what leadership is. Oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I started taking seminar courses on leadership, started reading on leadership, and uh, and that's taken to me to where I am today, which is, you know, this leadership guy who continues to kind of work through what is it that I see about leadership in the world.
Okay, so a beautiful backstory here, but all of a sudden, then you got to that main point of, okay, and then I discovered leadership, and then that's it. Was it like an epiphany? Was there a specific moment, or was there some mentorship or specific behaviors or impacts that you saw that says, ah, that's my
Right.
pursuit?
Yeah. What I saw in that group, in that board, was a group that worked as one. And all the egos had been put aside for the greater good of this community, and this board being kind of the leaders of this community. And if you know, if you're familiar with Atlanta and you know of Midtown Atlanta, and you know that this shining gem of a district within the city of Atlanta. Well, when I moved to Atlanta in 1981, that part of Atlanta was where all the drug activity had been, where all the strip clubs were. It was a very degraded place. And this group was going to change that. And so what you see, 40 years later is Atlanta as this beautiful place. It started with these people. And what was so remarkable is that they all put their egos aside and they worked as one. And I'd never seen that before. And I said, so this is what leadership is. So I started studying, and what I discovered was I disagreed with almost everything I read. And so I knew then that I had to think about leadership and I had to study it. Um, and so what followed from that was 15 years of studying it. And then I came up with this, in 1995, I became a consultant. I started a consulting practice as a consultant, as an organizational leadership consultant. Having never been a consultant, never run a business, I just started it. And I did that knowing that I knew how to solve problems. I knew how to talk to people. But the real secret, Deb, was this. And if people catch anything of anything that we're saying this afternoon, this is it. Our family had moved from West Virginia to North Carolina, and three guys in West Virginia said, I have a friend I want you to meet when you get there. So they gave me name and phone number. I called them up, said, so-and-so says I need to get to know you. So I'd like to come see you and tell you what I'm planning to do. So I did that. And then I asked them, knowing what I'm interested in doing, who do you know that you think I should know, and would you introduce me? And these guys, each one of them gave me between 10 and 15 names and phone numbers. And I called all those people. I mean, that's 30, 35 people there. And I did that over and over and over and over and over again. I still do it that way. And the premise of my podcast is, who do you know that you think I should know? Would you introduce me? And just send us an email together, and I'll send them an invite to be on the podcast. And what the beauty of that is, and this is, I think, is a leadership principle, is that you're trading your credibility with someone that you know to establish a relationship between that friend and someone else that you know that you also have credibility with, but they don't know each other. This is this triangulation of relationships where something beautiful and significant can happen because of an introduction. So this networking by introductions.
There's a couple of things I want to jump in here. Your insights are beautiful here. One of the things that you said that I want to draw out for my audience is that, one would say, how can you be a leadership consultant having not really been in a corporate leadership role? That's the typical path of people that I have brought onto the show. But you said with such conviction that I am good at solving problems and talking to people. And so often people label their capability by what they've done in the past versus looking at the skill set that they have and the value that you bring. And so I just want to bring that out because I think that's so important, because one could say, how can you be a consultant on leadership if you actually haven't been in typical leadership roles?
But but here's the secret, Deb. If you know people and you're having conversations with people, you should be learning from their experience. And so I was encountering all these people in Atlanta, corporate people. Some of the wealthiest people in Atlanta were in this church that I was a staff person at, and I learned from them. I learned from every person I talked to, and so the key was I'm going to learn something from them. And I'm going to ask questions to get at. So what's your experience been? How's it been being the CIO, or how's it been being an HR person? As you've gone through this transition, these are kinds of questions I ask. And so I'm the outsider. I'm the outsider,
Yeah. And
and not people. Most people don't feel like they can be the outsider. I thrive as being the outsider.
so what's really cool about this, and again, every time you make this amazing statement, I'm already like chomping at the bit, like I want to jump in. So people,
Sure.
when they listen, the drop-in CEO brand, Deb, so you're the CEO, you
Hmm.
drop in as a CEO into a company. I was like, no, 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 no. I drop in and there's usually a business issue and I partner with the CEO. I become one with them, seeking to understand their current situation and helping them to be able to paint a different situation in the future. And how do we close that gap? It's more of a mindset. So I may not have ever been a CEO in title. I call myself a founder of Illumination Partners, but I will tell you, I interview CEOs over and over and over again, and I am learning what are their typical challenges and what value I can bring to their situation, even if I've never been in their industry. So, to your credit, there is great power in becoming a leader by learning from others, as you have.
Well, let me take it one step further.
Right.
There's a spectrum of types of organizations, from the largest corporate organizations on the planet down to the smallest little mom and pop organization, and they all face the same issues. The issues are we thinking clearly about our values and our purpose? Are we building relationships of respect and trust where we can be really mutual teammates together? And are we aware of how the structure of our business is having an effect upon everyone? And maybe it's an obstacle to people actually doing good work. Those three things were the things I identified as patterns of behavior in the first 4 years of being a consultant. And I live off of those three. I call them the three dimensions of leadership: of ideas, relationships, and structure. And I live off of that, every day. I've lived off that every day ever since I saw that.
You and I again are aligned so much because when I wrote the CEO's Compass, I had in mind, and then it's becoming my second book. I said, stop chasing results and start pursuing peace of mind. And really, the focus is not a cookie cutter way of how to solve business problems, but looking at the dimensions of the compass, people, process, and platforms, and purpose and performance. And it's really about unleashing potential of the people, because then when you do that, you close gaps in their performance, and ultimately you do achieve those results. But when you only focus short sighted on the results, people can execute and get results on a short term basis, but you haven't built a sustainable organization. And so I think that's
Right.
why you and I believe so much about the same things.
And
Yeah.
and if we're talking about the potential of people
Yeah.
realizing, we have to, they need to be able to be clear about why they're doing what they're doing and what the impact they want to achieve by that. And they need to know how I can work with the people that I am in touch with at work. I need to know how I can work best with them. And I need to understand how to best utilize the structure of the organization to achieve the goals we have established.
Mm.
So it's true for everyone. It's you take whatever it is that you're doing, and those three things factor in.
I want to dig into your bio. Your bio was brief, but I found that the words that you used in your bio were um, very prescribed. And one of the things that you said was that you are a social catalyst. Again, far beyond being just a thought leader, writer, and podcast, a social catalyst. Tell me more about what you mean by that.
I'm looking to put people together who need each other.
Mm.
and I want to see something happen between them. I don't need to have anything come back to me as a benefit to me. I'm motivated to see people who I have respect for and I believe in, and I want to see them find people who can help them work together to achieve the goals that they have. So that's what I call a social catalyst. So I'm talking with people and say, hey, do you know so and so? Do you know her? And they say no. Well, let me introduce you. Let me get you two together because I think you two have something in common that you should be sharing.
So I know that you do this selflessly. You want to create better for humanity. But in that process, have you realized value coming back to you without looking for it?
Oh yeah, tremendous value. Um, it's taken me all over the world,
Okay.
and um, I can't say that I've become rich doing this,
Mhm.
but I have become tremendously fulfilled, and I know that there's a legacy that is being created. And let me give you an example of what I'm
Sure.
talking about.
Thank you.
As a minister, I realized early on, I mean, in the first 6 years of my service as a ordained minister, that I wasn't very good at being a parish minister because I was too oriented around change. So that's how I ended up ultimately. I worked for 7 years at a small college, and then I ended up starting my consulting practice. But what I would do though is I would take on interim church jobs where I was the interim pastor because they were in transition. And so a transition situation is always a change situation. So there's a church here in North Carolina that I invited myself in to be their interim. They had had a pastor who was running people off who were not going to be loyal to him. So it was a bad situation. So I wanted to see, what is it like to work with a group of people who had the nerve and the ability to have the presbytery remove the pastor? I mean, I had never seen that in that in during my course of my career, and I've yet to see it since. This is 20 years ago. So I show up for my first Sunday with them, and I'm thinking, well, what do we need to do to help them have the confidence to go forward and to kind of put this traumatic experience behind them? So I show up with a big rock, it's about the size of my hand. I stick it on the pulpit and I say, and I have not had the meeting with the board for them to select me. I'm just assuming that that's going to happen. I say, I want us to believe that God is going to take care of us. And I want you to do something to demonstrate that you believe that. So I want you to start bringing rocks to the church. Stick them out in the yard, and when we have enough, we're going to build a cairn. A cairn is like a cone-shaped structure, a stack of rocks. It's the sort of thing that they were creating in Scotland as weight markers. As, oh, this is the place you turn to go down to this valley or this. And so I said, we're going to build a confidence cairn because we believe that God is going to take care of this church. And so that began to happen. The next day there were rocks that began, and it took about 6 months to get enough rocks, and we built this rock. And then we had this big event, and we dedicated it not just to the church, but to the town and to the whole county. And it was great. So that was 20 years ago. I finished my time there, and I left. 2 years ago, I have a guest in from England, and I'm driving her around and showing her places. And I said, well, I'm going to go show you the confidence care. And I hadn't been there in decades at this point. And it's there, and I'm standing out, and the pastor walks out the door, and he points over and says, Ed Brenegar, what are you doing here? I had never met him before, but he knew who I was. And so we go in and we have some conversation. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm invited back to come preach on their homecoming Sunday. And I walk in. So when I was there 20 years ago, there was only about 50 people, and they were older, and it had been a hard time. I walk in when I come back on that Sunday, and this church is filled. There was probably 200 people there, and I know probably 8 of them. And um, and so I'm amazed that in the 20 years since we started the conferences, Karen, this church has grown in confidence, and they've grown in numbers. Sunday, I was talking to a guy who also is a pastor up there in that part of the mountains of North Carolina. And I was talking about it, and he says, yeah, what you did there is a little thing, but it was a massive little thing that made a huge difference because they still remember you. And I said, wow, that's really fantastic. So I think the lesson is take initiative, do something. It doesn't have to be big. It just has to be something that where you're contributing to the benefit or to the growth or whatever it is that you're a part of.
Okay, so my eyes are tearing up. For those of you watching on the YouTube channel, I get very choked up when
Good.
um
I
I know you didn't show up here to make me cry here, but it's one of those things. A couple things I take away from your story is you became the leader of that church, what they needed at that time versus just filling the role of being the pastor, and you took them from being, possibly victims of the past to let's fully focus on the future. And it's just a rock, but now you've left a legacy and you are remembered, and people will show up and, hey, that's that church over there with all of those rocks. But I think as leaders, we're only here for a short time. And so what can we then do with the lives of the people that are in our care to focus them on the future of greater purpose so that maybe they talk about us, or at least the works that we've done for them. It's so inspiring.
well, I think the message is there there is no contribution that doesn't matter, and that you don't have to be the big shot, and you don't have to be someone out in front. You can do something that makes a difference, and it will contribute to the future of the organization or the community or your family. Or
Yeah, I mean, wise words, like I say, for the personal side and not only the business side. I'd love to go in a slightly different direction because, again, like to get to know more about the entire person. Is
okay.
that you have the Global Impact Network, um, and I just want to actually you're the founder and CEO of the Circle of Impact, and you have the Global Impact Network. Tell me a little bit about the purposeful work that you're doing now.
Circle of Impact is just was my consulting practice,
Right.
and I was just going in to work with organizations solving the problems. The Global Impact Network is actually not a global. It's a global network only in that I'm working with people around the world, and the goal of that is to help them wherever they are develop their local networks, their networks of relationships there,
Mm.
because what I find is, particularly in the developing world, that they look to us in the developed world as the ones who are their leaders and the ones that are going to resource them. And I tell them, just that's not the future. You have to figure out this, and you need to build your relationships there. I mean, if you want to build, like I had a guy in Kenya reach out to me, and they want to build a community center in their community, and he was not totally upfront, and ultimately he said, well, we need some money. Can you give us some money? And I said, I'm not giving you any money because that defeats the purpose of you asking me for help. I said, what I want you to do is go out. I want you to find people who can give you a little bit of money, and they find some other people to give you a little bit of money, and you start networking and you build that network. And then you're never going to have any difficulty doing the next project because they're all going to be committed to you because you have given them something that really is of value. They have contributed to something that has built and has made a difference in their community. And that just never got across to him because they're so used to looking to the West for money. But that's the purpose of the Global Impact Network, is to help them develop their networks so that they can do the projects that they need to do.
And again, that's very valuable advice. I find so many leaders are maybe well connected within their organization, but fail to go outside their network into their communities and just establish relationships. I found when I went out onto my own about 6 years ago, I had like maybe 800 LinkedIn connections, and I really didn't know many of them. And now, after 480 podcast episodes, and I have spoken to hundreds of up and coming quality leaders. My network is starting to be big enough that when somebody says, Deb, do you know somebody? Let me go through my Rolodex and find somebody. Or for me, in my pursuits, if I take the decision, I'm going to now go on TV or into other aspects of the media, I've collected a lot of stones and rocks along the way that know me, that I've built relationships with, and now might be able to support me by their thoughts, with their time, or other connections, and not necessarily money. So
Right. Yeah,
networking
I
is
see.
amazing. Yeah, keep it going.
Well, and it's interesting because when you begin to deal with people at that level, and it's people here, right, in my own community who they want help, but they don't know, they want to do something, but they don't know how to do it. They don't have any background, they don't have any experience, and they need someone to walk them through the process. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And why is that? I don't know. I don't have an answer to that. But I will say this, that I think a lot of the key to all of this is how you build relationships and why those relationships matter. And they're not for you. They're not, your relationships are not for you. Your relationship is for them. You're reaching out to the people to give to them because then they will model that to other people. That's the way I view this.
Okay. And they teach this in sales because I've got a sales coach right now. We can always talk about here's my offer and how I can solve your problem. But it's really about I care about you. Tell me about your problems and how can I help you? And it may not be me that can solve your problem, but who do I know that can help you?
Right.
And we may or may not hear from that person again, maybe 6 months, 12 months down the road. They come back and say, Deb, this is how you help me. And then the relationship is so much richer. It's hard in this society to be such a giver to humanity, to either connect others with others or give of ourselves, because we're always looking for that hustle and that transaction. And what can I get from this? And it's a very hard mindset to shift. And I think leaders need to realize this, that we're in this to connect with humanity. And I think you said it best, connect with humanity, help solve other people's problems, and don't seek the immediate reward, but just know that these are dividends towards your future, your legacy, and people will come help you when you do need that.
Yeah, that's right.
You have some amazing stuff on your website as well. As I was looking through some of your content, you talked about having two statements who define who I am and what I do. I'm only going to pick one of them, but one of the things you said is, or somebody said, a student once told me, "You believe in us, so we can believe in ourselves." So tell me why that statement is so meaningful.
Um, I think I see that in the world today, people have a hard time believing in themselves. And even the narcissist doesn't believe in themselves. They're playing some kind of game to show that they're strong and they got it together. But underneath that surface, underneath that ego is a broken soul who needs someone who say, I believe in you, and I believe that if you decide, you make the decision, you can go anywhere you want, but you have to make that decision. So that's what I see. Let me give you another example of this. So I look at people. I've worked hard not to sit in judgment of people. And so what I'm looking at when I look at someone is what is it that I need to love about that person? What is it that I need to see in that person that I can connect to that elevates their sense of what is possible? And the more that I have done that, the easier it has become to walk into any circumstance and be able to make connections with people. Sorry for the tears.
No, because it's so much aligned with what I do. I mean, I on the back of a napkin when I first started my business and I was under the tutelage of another consultant, I wrote, when you're trying to brand yourself, what three words, kind of tie together that define who you are. And I said lift, light, and lead. And then I put that
Mhm.
away for some time. I said, oh, could it be elevate and something snazzy? Put the napkin away. And then recently I pulled it out again and it's become part of really positioning myself of who I am as a person. So I want to help lift leaders by shining a light on their gifts,
Yes.
helping to lift them and ultimately like leave their legacy. So maybe that's 4 L's in there. But, I had a theme last year to go big. And then I realized, well, it's not about going big. For what purpose? Yes, there's some things you can set in place to help you with your business, yourself personally, but for what purpose? And I said, ultimately, it's to connect with humanity. I know there's something in me that needs to connect with humanity. And the vehicles are for which deeply listen, have really significant conversations, and find something in them that they can't see in themselves, is shining a light on them, which poses the next question I want to send back to you. Why do you feel there are so many, I'll use the word, or you used it, broken souls, or people that don't see their self-worth? What are your thoughts?
Um, we could go a long time on this, but let me make it simple. Make it simple. I think the modern world is organized as a set of industrial platforms for people to work in, but most of their relationships are transactional, and they're not transformational. They're not built off respect and trust. They're not mutual. There's not mutual accountability. There's not mutual support. And they just have to go and do what they're told to do, and then they leave. And it doesn't work. It doesn't make people happy. It doesn't fulfill them. It may put food on the table and a roof over their heads and take care of their children and whatnot, but it's not satisfying. And so I see the organization and the structure of the modern world as the major obstacle to um, being a happy person whose soul is healed and can really see that their life is to be giving to others.
And so that's why you and I are here today, to have this conversation, and whoever is listening out there, to be inspired that you are worthy of who you are as a human being on this world. And just know that if you set your mind to it, you can do anything with impact. With that, I would love to bring it to a close soon. But Ed, we know this is part of building a relationship and seeing how we can support each other. I would love to give you the mic one last time if there's any last parting thoughts for my audience. And, who do you want to connect with, or how you might want people to connect with you? Because to my audience, Ed is amazing. He won't bring tears to your eyes in all cases, but just a great human to have a
Well,
conversation with. So Ed, your thoughts.
I just encourage people to watch my podcast, the Eddy Network Podcast. You can find it on YouTube. Just Google my name on YouTube, and you can find it there. And I think it provides a way to see people, a lot of different people. I'm over 200 episodes now, Deb. A lot of people who are discovering the sort of things that Deb and I have talked about today. And so what I would like you to think about is that you don't have to go and do some major program to change your life. You just have to decide that your life matters in the little things, and find a little thing to go do that makes a difference in someone's life. And it may be just one of your neighbors. It may be all it is, but when you do that once, then you can do it again and again and again. And you will then begin to have this sense of openness that opens your awareness of who you are and what is possible in your life. And
Well,
that's
that beautiful words, Ed. And again, I am grateful that we've gotten to know each other, for the introduction and being able to share your thoughts with my community. I just want to say thank you so much for being an amazing guest, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you, Deb. It's been great to be with you, as always.